Buenas tardes. Voy a hacer la presentación en español, aunque las diapositivas están
Good
en
afternoon.
inglés.
I'm going to deliver my presentation in Spanish, even though the slides are in English, but I think it will be better for everyone.
Bueno, antes de explicar las mejoras que
Before
hemos hecho en
going on
ENSAYO,
to explain what we've done in our dry essays, I wanted to mention who we are. This presentation, well, I'm delivering the presentation, but my work team includes Elena Frías, who is here with us in the room, and we have indeed, over the course of many years, providing technical support to the Ministry of Transport, Mobility and Urban Agenda, that's its current name, for developing the technical code, technical building code, and we've been involved in safety and accessibility document too. And very briefly, I wanted to tell you what has taken us to this point and what we've done for now. In 2006, the slip resistance requirement was introduced as part of the technical code. We had to select a test, an essay, because there weren't any to that point in Spain. And we decided to go to a general essay that wasn't tied to product. Therefore, we went to 12633, and we determined that would be the friction pendulum with rubber 97, I think he said, and only in wet conditions. This is how we established the requirements in the building code. This morning, Richard already showed the requirements, the table of requirements in Spain. And normally in areas where water could be present, such as bathrooms, kitchens, close to the entrance of buildings, the limits established for those are very similar to those established by other organizations in other countries, about 35. But in dry areas of buildings where there are requirements, because in some countries they haven't regulated dry areas, but here we determined that we should do that. So we considered that the risk was lower, and the class is therefore lower too. And it is not the risk of wet slipping is not being considered in this area. Here we're just considering the risk of slipping without liquids present. But we determined that the value should be lower, but we tested the numbers, of course. And this came with problems, of course, because in the pavement sector considered that this was detrimental for them, because it wasn't being considered that dry floors were not without danger, but they weren't being able to get these results in wet environments. And for many years, they tried to introduce the dry test as an alternative method to the building code. This is a support document. This is not a regulated document, so to speak. It's an interpretation of the building code that establishes a series of specifications, giving an alternative, so to speak, to test this type of floorings in dry conditions. And many studies were performed in this sense. I'm not going to talk about them because we don't have enough time, but here we see that there's a correlation of with the roughness and the pendulum volume obtained in dry conditions. And this was an interlab essay done with 15 labs evaluating the main rubbers. One of our main concerns was that rubber 57, which was the one included in the standard and the essay that was included in the building code, is not what's the rubber that's normally used in other countries, and particularly in dry tests, there was quite a relevant dispersion. And for instance, compared to rubber 96. I don't know if the clicker works. Sorry about that. The red dots are rubber 96, and the lines that stem from the dots are the dispersions. And in the black dots, rubber 55, you see that the dispersion is higher and the values are also higher. And in parallel, many other things have happened. I don't want to go into detail, but the test standard that was used in the building code was cancelled. The European European standard established not just one, but three different methods. And even though the way to use the pendulum was very appropriate, actually the Spanish group decided to create Spanish standard, which is practically based on the annex to the European standard on the friction pendulum. And recently, just to finish with the history part of my presentation, this standard has been included to replace the one that has been eliminated from the code. Also, the ELA was explained this morning by another speaker. This is a lab test that has been performed, an inter-lab test that includes many labs, and we must bear in mind that this also includes labs that are not necessarily considered to be good labs. These are just labs that have registered to perform building quality control tests. They, in a way, say that they are amenable to being labs, but they are not necessarily labs that render very good results or high-precision measurements. And ELA was created as a tool to determine whether these labs were performing their job adequately or whether they should be corrected or measures should be implemented. In ELA 2017, as Victoria mentioned, there have been three focusing on pendulums. But I'm just going to talk about the dry tests. So I'm not going to talk about ELA 2016, but the goal was to determine the dispersion levels and the performance of the labs. These were the results obtained that year. Tiles were sent to the different labs and ceramic labs. 72 labs were involved, and there was quite a great dispersion in terms of results. And actually, this really led us to question the precision of this essay from that standpoint. And we tried to filter out the outliers, but that didn't really render very good results because we had to eliminate most labs to get to a consistent result, so it didn't seem reasonable either. So this year, what we've tried to do, what was determined was that many labs were not performing well, and they were using rubbers inadequately, they didn't calibrate their pendulums adequately, or they didn't calibrate them at all. They didn't verify their tests. And what was decided was that next year, in 2019, ELA was to be used to try and control the performance of labs. Instead of sending the tiles to the labs, we decided to perform tests on site so that we could have someone oversee the tests as such. Just by doing this, many labs, because they knew that they were going to be overseen by someone, they calibrated their pendulums before the tests, which is something that they probably didn't do in 2017.
And the presence itself of a person during the test who could point out some of the mistakes that were being made did improve quite a bit the situation. So we also sent not just people to the essay on site. I mean, the pavements were different, the floorings were different, and we couldn't have a global essay, nationwide essay. So that is why not only did we ask them to do them on site in 11 locations in Spain, we then sent tiles, big format tiles, to those labs so that they would simulate an on-site test with results that could be comparable all over the national territory. And we also sent them some verification surfaces so that they would verify their pendulum with the same surfaces. So we tried to minimize the results dispersion we had. And we asked them to choose two surfaces, one to do wet testing and another one for dry testing. In both surfaces, in all surfaces, they had 4 testing areas where they carried out their tests. And the results in the on-site test, not on the tile, were difficult really to consider because each of the locations had 3 labs or 4 or 5 labs, not enough. So it's not very easy to see the results. Here you have have
los valores de repetibilidad y
the
de reproducibilidad
reproducibility and repeatability values. They're a bit dispersed, but the average values are around 16 units more or less. But the test, the nationwide test, where all labs did try and test the same tiles that were the ones that we sent them, we did see that there was a clear improvement when compared to 2017. The repeatability and reproducibility values are here. Many of these labs have to be eliminated because the figures that are in red are the calibrations, and the ones that are in red did not have the expected results, so they were eliminated at the initial phase. And by eliminating those labs that did not verify the pendulum correctly, well, we have a reproducibility value of 10 units, which from our point of view is very good, especially if we take into account that we're talking about lots of different labs, all sorts of labs. So it's really a snapshot of what is happening in the real world, and not so much a picture of interlaboratory essays that we had seen in another slide, which were labs that were much more reliable. So these are the conclusions, really. So we think that training labs in tests such as these ones, which don't have a very long background in Spain because we've only done them since 2006, is very important to have reliable results, and in order to be able to trust in the results that they present to us. So that's the process we're in. Labs are improving the results, and that's all. Thank you very much.